Hello, Dylan with Paul's Axe here. This is a short, well, I don't know how short it is, 10 minutes, 12 minutes or something. Little video of just me cutting a log from work today. This is a pretty typical job. Typical wood, typical dimensions of what I normally do around here. It's Norway pine, 8-foot long stuff, average diameter, making everything into 2x4, 2x6. Excuse me, a little bit of 1-inch stickers and 4x4s. This is pretty typical method that I would use for a log of this size, targeting a dimension of that size. If there's anything I do that's maybe different than others, I always use a 90-degree turn. You know, when I make my first face, I rotate 90 instead of 180. All the way around. The only time I do a 180-degree turn is if there's a lot of stress in that log, or I think there's going to be a lot of stress in that log. It sometimes helps to balance the stress better when you relieve it from opposing sides. You'll get less deflection in your cant that way. I don't typically do that. I take enough flitches off, which are the pieces I shove off on the loading arms to edge later. That's called a flitch. It's whatever thickness of lumber you're cutting in, you know, it still has the bark on it and whatever, as you're progressing down to your target width on your cants. If you take enough of those off, it does a real good job of balancing stress. In a log this size, there's only a few, 3 or 4 if I remember. But this is a 8-foot stuff. No major bow or anything like that in that log, so I didn't foresee there to be a lot of stress. When it comes to the point where I split that cant into my 3 5/8 and my 5 5/8 cant, you'll see me rub the side of the cant, and what I'm feeling for there is if that cant's moving, if it's deflecting at all. If it does, sometimes you'll feel the top one kind of crawl one way or the other as the blade progresses through the cant. If it does do that, I'll take either both or one of those cants, depending on which one moved, or if they both moved, then I'll skim both sides, taking off half the thickness that I normally would be set up for, just to get rid of that bow in it. You know, otherwise your bottom board is going to be thin in the middle and your top one's going to be thick in the middle. Very rare that I have to do that. Usually that amount of deflection that you do feel in something like that is minimal. There was none or very little in that one. I don't know that you'd even see it on a tape measure if there was any difference throughout the length of that on the top and bottom pieces of lumber. Other than that, I guess I do a right-handed rotation right before I split it, rather than just using the turner or the clamp to just turn against the side supports. I don't know if you can really tell in the video where the heart is in that log. I did that because the heart favored more on that side, and I was, you know, when you split a cant like that, if you're doing equal size cants, 4-inch or 6-inch or whatever, you're going to be splitting it right on the pith, right on the heart. That's not always the best method to use. You're exposing the heartwood on an edge of a few of those boards, guaranteed that you're going to have cracks there. Splitting things on the heart can release a lot of stress rather quickly, and you can have 2 cants that are bowed, which when you turn it back up, it's going to result in crowned lumber, which is, in my opinion, the worst defect you can have, green off the mill. So I did that to favor the heart to be more centered in the 6-inch cant rather than right on the edge of the opposing cant, the 4s. Other than that, pretty basic, I guess, making a round thing into a square thing. The dimensions I cut with studs vary on different customers. This job, likely these studs are never going to be milled in any way ever again. They're just going to be built with. So the way I like to saw those dimensions with this species is I oversize 1/8 of an inch from over factory So my 2x4s are right on 1.5 inches thickness, and they're 3 5/8 wide. I do that because I don't see a lot of thickness shrinkage in flat sawn lumber where the grain is, for the most part, going this direction. Wood will shrink, tangentially along the grain, so it's gonna, in flat sawn board, it's gonna shrink more in width than it will in shrinkness, thickness. If it's quarter sawn, it's gonna shrink more in thickness than it will in width, proportionally to the piece. So it could end up slightly under 1.5 inches in thickness, but likely it'll hardly show on a tape measure. It will shrink some in width. It'll probably still be a little bit proud of 3.5 inches. So it's not going to exactly match. Some pieces will, some pieces won't. Depends on from where in the log they came from. The orientation of the grain. Obviously, the sapwood, the closer to the bark you are, the more moisture is in there, so the more shrinkage you're going to see. The larger the pieces get, the more oversized you need to go, because they shrink. The amount of shrinkage is a percentage of its whole. So if you cut a 1 inch by 12 inch Norway pine, which has a fair amount of shrinkage, that thing could be 11.5 inches when it's dry. If it's 3 5/8 wide and 1.5 inches thick, it's going to shrink the same percentage, but only that same percentage of 3 5/8 of an inch, not 12. So you're not going to see as much shrinkage. So that's why I size them that way. Some guys want a full 2 by a full 4. Some guys want 1.5 inches, 3.5. I used to oversize in thickness by 1/8 inch, but I always found if I'm using the stuff, I'd have to plane off that damn near 1/8 inch, and I don't like planing. And for what I do for framing, it's just, they're so close, it's fine. I make them that way so if they have to buy more wood, they'll likely match the factory lumber they'll have to buy. If they run short of something I sawed for them. You don't want all your studs to be specific to only your wood, because what if you don't have enough, or your customer doesn't have enough. Other than that, pretty straightforward stuff. You just make your cants whatever size you're looking at, saw them out. I leave all the lumber stacked on the mill until I get done with the cans, just because time-wise it makes more sense for me to do that. Yeah, I got to come up and over the whole cant if it's too wide, just so they don't fall off. A lot of times if I'm only doing one, whereas I got my 5 5/8 cant, I'll drag the blade back through the cut for the first 3, maybe 4 cuts until I get enough weight where it's hard for me to pick up on the end of it. Less movement, less time. But when I got a few wide, this job, there was some big ones in there where I was doing 2 2x6s and 2 2x4s at a time. So 4 pieces of lumber in each pass. And if you try to drag the blade back through that, they just fall off and it gets to be a big mess. So you just leave them stacked all up on the cant till you're done sawing it. Then you go and you sticker the stuff and do all your stacking at one time. Dealing with the flitches is pretty straightforward. With those measurements, using those numbers, it's pretty easy to. You don't really have to think about anything too much. If you come down on the numbers that I use, I come down that in that particular log, 9 3/8, cut it. That way, if I want to make a 2x6 and a 2x4, I have that piece. Down to 7 3/8. If I split that, I get 2 3 5/8, and then down to 5 5/8 if I need to. For the last few, that one I think I ended up splitting 2 at 6 and 2 at 4, or 5 5/8, and I don't remember what it was, but it's in the video, you can tell. Other than that job site was laid out really nice. That was a local tree service here right in the town I live in. He had 1 2 3 4 different piles of logs, all stacked in a row. That worked out great the way that site was. The big ones were first. He had a little pile of pine, and then the bigger pile of pine, and there was some oak at the end, which I didn't end up sawing because I hit a bunch of nails and the rest were full of nails, so it was like 4 more logs that I had to leave there. A couple really nice red oak, but they were loaded with hardware, so they had to stay. I didn't do a good job of capturing kind of what that site looked like, the layout of it. I know I mean to do that more. The reason those sticker piles, there's so many of them, is because I kept moving the saw down the road there to keep, get each sequential log pile. I like my sticker piles to be right perpendicular to where the mill is. Obviously there's some that are way behind me. That was from a day or two prior. I think he had a little over 7,000 feet of wood there, something like that. Maybe I had 4 days in it, but it was a fun job, good job. Everything. It's nice working for tree guys because they do things pretty organized, and at least this guy did, and it was good. Another cool thing about that job is right before I took that video, a timber wolf came running right through that job site. It was 15 yards away from me. The saw was running. It was right about noon. I looked over, and there he was. And I've seen wolves around here before. I'm in Minnesota, central, northern Minnesota. Only from a vehicle, never on the ground. I mean, 15 yards away from something that size, and his back was at least as tall as my belt. That was pretty damn neat to see. And I'm not out in the woods there. I'm maybe a mile from town. Behind there is Highway 371, big busy highway, a couple hundred yards behind where the truck is parked, or in front of it rather. Pretty neat to see. So that was kind of memorable. But so there it is. Here's a short little clip of making studs. Hope you enjoy. Thanks. it all is.